It started with a silence so loud, so deliberate, that Hollywood insiders immediately knew something was wrong. Oprah Winfrey, the woman who once opened the gates of her Montecito estate to Harry and Meghan as if they were long-lost family, suddenly stopped replying. No messages, no calls, not even a polite, "Let me get back to you." And that silence, according to people close to the situation, wasn't an accident. It was a statement, a boundary, a line in the sand. Why now? Why Oprah? And why are Harry and Meghan desperately reaching out in the first place? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Those are the questions lighting up the entertainment world, the royal world, and frankly the entire internet. Because when a friendship like this collapses, a friendship that shifted global narratives, destroyed reputations, and injected the Sussex story deep into American popular culture, something big is happening behind the scenes. Something that goes way beyond unfollowing someone on Instagram or declining an invitation to brunch. And trust me, this goes way beyond any of that. What if I told you the final straw wasn't about betrayal or disappointment or broken trust? What if it was about something far more awkward, far more entitled, and far more expensive? A private jet, a security team, and a request so bold even Oprah, who has seen it all, allegedly said, "Absolutely not." But before we get to that, here's the part no one is talking about. Harry and Meghan's rumored plan to take a grand return tour of Australia in 2026, a plan that insiders say Prince William is furious about. Not irritated, not annoyed, furious. Because if this trip happens the way sources claim the Sussexes are planning it, it won't just be another PR stunt. It will shake up Commonwealth politics, undermine the royal family strategy, and drag Australia straight into a trans-Pacific royal war. And Oprah? She wants no part of it. Imagine this. You're Oprah Winfrey. You've built an empire of goodwill, trust, and carefully managed public relationships. You've sat across from presidents, queens, billionaires, and icons. Your brand is truth, empathy, emotional intelligence, and above all, boundaries. Then one of the most scandal-charged couples in the world reaches out to you, not to reconnect, not to check in as friends, but with a request that would place your own reputation, your money, your privacy, and your name on the line. So you pause, you think, you weigh it carefully, and then you decide enough. But let's back up for a moment, because to understand why Oprah's silence is so explosive, you have to know how we got here in the first place. Think back to 2021, the Oprah interview. The moment Harry and Meghan sat down under that Montecito pergola and opened fire on the royal family. Around the world, millions watched. Millions took sides. And Oprah, intentionally or not, became the central figure who elevated the Sussexes' grievances to global proportions. Some people believed every word. Some didn't believe a single syllable. But one thing was undeniable. That interview changed everything. It changed the monarchy. It changed the media. It changed the Sussexes' future. And it changed Oprah herself. Because after the interview aired, a strange shift happened. Oprah's brand, once untouchable, found itself being questioned. Critics said she had been manipulated. Supporters said she had been courageous. Insiders whispered she regretted letting the interview become a mudslide of accusations she couldn't fully verify in real time. And though Oprah never publicly expressed regret, sources say the relationship between her and the Sussexes was never quite the same again. Fast forward to 2024. Hollywood support for Meghan begins to cool. Streaming deals stall. The paparazzi frenzy fades. And the narrative shifts from Hollywood royalty to Hollywood risk. Then 2025 arrives, and the rumor mill begins to churn. Harry and Meghan are planning a major, imagery-building trip to Australia in 2026. A tour. A soft reintroduction. A public resurrection. But here's the kicker. They allegedly don't want to pay for it themselves. Because privately funded international travel is expensive. Security is expensive. And the global spotlight? It brings risks, pressure, and logistical nightmares. Which is why, according to insiders, the Sussexes turned to someone who had always been generous, always been supportive, always been willing to lend more than just a platform. They turned to Oprah. And when Oprah realized what they were asking for, a private jet for the Australia trip, free security, and possibly even production support for a documentary project. That's when everything changed. Think about that for a second. Think about the level of boldness behind such a request. Why Oprah? Why would they assume she'd foot the bill? Why would they believe she'd want to tie herself to another high-drama storyline? Maybe because she did it once. Maybe because she made them famous all over again. Maybe because she was the one American powerhouse who had their back. But here's the part that truly raised eyebrows. According to sources, Harry and Meghan didn't approach Oprah with the humility of a friend asking for help, but with the expectation of partners continuing a business arrangement. As if Oprah were an investor, a sponsor, a co-producer, a mentor who owed them something. And Oprah? She didn't respond. That silence sent shockwaves through Montecito. Because Oprah's silence is never just silence. It's a decision. She doesn't ghost. She doesn't ignore. She doesn't play games. She simply chooses what does and doesn't align with her brand. And this, according to multiple insiders, didn't align. But that's not even the half of it. While all of this was happening, Prince William was being briefed by advisors about the Sussexes' rumored Australia trip. And let me tell you right now, he was not amused. In fact, insiders say William sees the potential 2026 Australia visit as a direct threat to the monarchy's strategy in the Commonwealth. Why? Because Australia isn't just another stop on a royal tour calendar. It's a country debating its constitutional future. It's a country where the Republican movement is growing. And it's a country where the monarchy's image matters deeply. If Harry and Meghan swoop in, cameras blazing, crowds cheering, speeches flowing, and tabloids spinning a redemption arc, it could complicate everything the royal family is planning. Especially William, who will one day rely heavily on Commonwealth support. So imagine his expression when he hears, they want to go to Australia. And they're trying to fund it through Oprah. And they want it to be a global media event. This isn't just a trip. It's a power play. Whether intentional or not, it inserts the Sussexes into Commonwealth politics. And according to palace insiders, William has had enough. But here's the twist. This isn't just a story about a friendship breaking apart. It's a story about two worlds colliding, Hollywood and monarchy. It's a story about boundaries, about influence, about image, about money, and about the quiet, behind-the-scenes maneuvering that determines who rises and who falls in the celebrity food chain. Most people assume that when a friendship ends in Hollywood, it ends with a phone call or an argument. But in reality, the biggest falls don't come from shouting matches. They come from stillness, from careful decisions, from the choice not to engage. Oprah made that choice, and Harry and Meghan, according to insiders, are scrambling to understand why. Some say Oprah is simply protecting her brand. Some say she doesn't want to be pulled into another royal controversy. Others whisper something more dramatic, that Oprah has seen enough behind the scenes to decide she can no longer attach her reputation to the Sussexes. What do you think? Do you think Oprah is drawing a boundary? Do you think she was hurt? Do you think she was used? Or do you think she simply doesn't want to be involved in the next Sussex media storm? Because here's the truth. No matter what really happened, the silence itself has become the message. And that message has now reached Buckingham Palace, Hollywood boardrooms, Australian political circles, and millions of people watching online. But what exactly did Harry and Meghan ask for? What was in that message to Oprah that finally crossed the line? What detail made Oprah of all people, say, no more? You're about to find out. The first sign that something was wrong didn't come from Oprah herself. It came from someone much quieter, someone who has worked with her for more than 20 years. A man known for keeping secrets, swallowing scandals, and protecting Oprah's reputation with a level of loyalty most celebrities could only dream of. He never speaks out of turn. He never gossips. He never leaks. But even he slipped. He told a colleague, off the record, Oprah doesn't want anything to do with this anymore. And just like that, the story began. But let's rewind to the moment everything started to unravel. The moment Harry and Meghan realized Oprah wasn't picking up their calls. It wasn't dramatic at first. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't even confrontational. It was something much colder. Distance. Do you know that feeling when someone who used to respond in minutes suddenly takes hours? Then days. Then weeks. You tell yourself they're busy. You tell yourself they're traveling. You tell yourself they're overwhelmed. But deep down you know, something changed. That's exactly what happened between Oprah and the Sussexes, except on a much larger scale, a scale big enough to shake Montecito's elite circles. Because for Oprah, silence is a language. A deliberate language. A carefully chosen one. She doesn't disappear without a reason. She doesn't ignore messages unless it's strategic. And she doesn't distance herself unless she's protecting something. Her peace, her brand, or her legacy. The shocking part? Harry and Meghan didn't notice the shift right away. They thought it was temporary. They thought it was scheduling. They thought Oprah was simply busy with one of her dozens of media, charity, or entertainment projects. But insiders say Oprah was already pulling back months before they realized it. And the reason for her withdrawal didn't start with the Australia request. It started with something far more subtle. Something that grew quietly in the background like a shadow getting longer at sunset. It started with regret. Not regret for interviewing them. Oprah stands by her work. Not regret for giving them a platform. She believes everyone deserves a voice. But regret for the unexpected consequences that followed. Because after that now iconic 2021 interview, Oprah found herself in a strange position, accused by some of enabling a narrative she didn't fully intend to amplify. Critics blamed her for not fact-checking claims in real time. Supporters accused her of being too soft. Royalists said she helped blow up the monarchy. Americans said she changed nothing. And in the middle of it all, Oprah quietly began to understand something. Their storm had become her storm. And Oprah doesn't do storms. She does clarity. She does healing. She does inspiration. Not drama. Not conflict. Not international headlines that refuse to die. But Harry and Meghan? Drama followed them like a shadow. Everywhere. Always. And Montecito? You'd think it would be the perfect refuge. Quiet, wealthy, beautiful, full of A-listers who love privacy. But instead of becoming a sanctuary, it became a lightning rod. Paparazzi swarmed. Gossip spread. Hollywood whispers started turning into public opinions. Suddenly, being associated with the Sussexes was becoming complicated. And Oprah felt it. Her team felt it. Her network felt it. Her sponsors felt it. And that's when Oprah did something she rarely does. She began creating distance. First, fewer invitations. Then fewer casual drop-ins. Then fewer connections. Then fewer collaborations. And finally, fewer responses. Some say Oprah quietly reached her emotional limit. Some say she was tired. Some say she felt used. Others say her advisors urged her to cut ties before another controversy erupted. And honestly, all of those explanations may be true at the same time. Because relationships don't usually break in one moment. They break slowly, crack by crack, shift by shift, until suddenly, everything gives way at once. So when Harry and Meghan's request for free security and a private jet eventually landed on Oprah's radar, it wasn't so much the first straw as it was the final one. And here's where the story gets even more fascinating. People close to Oprah say she's extremely empathetic, sometimes to a fault. She forgives easily. She listens deeply. She tries to understand motives, wounds, and traumas. And she gave Harry and Meghan more grace than almost anyone else in Hollywood. She let them speak. She let them frame their narrative. She let them share their pain. And she let them do it on one of the biggest platforms in the world. But there's a difference between empathy and exploitation. And Oprah knows the line. Some insiders believe she started to question whether the Sussexes valued her as a friend, or whether they saw her as a resource. And the Australia request only magnified that concern. Inside Oprah's circle, one advisor reportedly said, "They're making her responsible for their image. That's not friendship. That's pressure." Another allegedly warned, "If she agrees now, they'll keep asking. It won't stop." And the most telling comment came from someone close to her long-term network partners. "This is turning into a brand liability, not a brand asset." Think about that for a second. When Oprah Winfrey, one of the most beloved, respected, and carefully managed public figures on earth, starts hearing the word liability, that's not gossip. That's a red flag. So what happened next? Oprah didn't send a message. She didn't pick up the phone. She didn't schedule a meeting. She didn't even reply. She chose silence. Because silence isn't ambiguous. It's intentional. It's protective. It sends a message without ever speaking. And that message was loud. But here's the part Harry and Meghan didn't expect. Oprah's silence didn't stay private. Her inner circle is small, but Hollywood is smaller, and Montecito is the smallest of all. Word travels fast when the right people know the right people. Suddenly, the whispers began. Oprah is done. She's distancing herself. She's not responding to them anymore. She's drawing a line. These whispers reached publicists, then producers, then celebrity managers, then studio executives, and eventually, the Sussex team. And when they finally realized Oprah wasn't replying, not out of forgetfulness, not out of delay, but out of a decision, panic reportedly set in. Because Oprah wasn't just a friend. She was an anchor, a validator, a credibility booster, a symbol of American support. Without Oprah, their foundation in Hollywood became shakier. Their influence shrank. Their safety net disappeared. Their reputation entered a new phase. One without the Oprah shield. But let me ask you something. Have you ever felt someone pull away so gently, so calmly, that you didn't realize what was happening until it was too late? Have you ever looked back and thought, wait, when did things change? That's exactly what happened here. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't public. It was quiet, strategic, controlled, calculated. And it worked. Because by the time Harry and Meghan figured it out, the door had already closed. And that silence, that drawn-out, intentional silence, became the spark that lit the fuse on everything that came next. The Sussexes planned an international media reboot. They wanted Oprah involved. They expected her support. They believed the relationship was still intact. But Oprah? She had already moved on. And here's where the story takes a dramatic turn. Oprah wasn't the only one backing away. Several major Hollywood figures followed her lead. Quietly, gradually, carefully. Because in Hollywood, no one walks away first unless someone more powerful walks away before them. Oprah walked away, and the ripple effect had only just begun. But if you think Oprah's silence was shocking, wait until you hear how the Sussexes reacted when they realized she had cut them off. Their response was emotional, strategic, and, depending on who you ask, a little desperate. And what came after that? What happened when their team tried one more time to get Oprah's attention? Would send shockwaves through Montecito, Buckingham Palace, and even Australia. It arrived at exactly 2:14 a.m. Pacific time. That's what insiders say. Not 2 o'clock, not 2:30, not sometime late in the night. No, precisely 2:14 a.m. Why does that matter? Because people don't send harmless messages at that hour. They send the heavy ones, the emotional ones, the panicked ones, the, I shouldn't be asking this, but I'm going to anyway ones. And that's exactly what this was. A message, long, detailed, heavily worded, sent straight to Oprah's inner circle. And the moment her assistant opened it the following morning, he knew it wasn't the kind of message Oprah wanted to start her day with. Because this wasn't a simple favor. This wasn't a friendly update. This wasn't a so good to catch up kind of note. It was a request. A big one. One that insiders say crossed a line Oprah didn't even realize she needed to draw until that moment. But before we break down the message itself, let's set something straight. Harry and Meghan were not sending this note impulsively. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment idea. This wasn't a late-night thought spiral. This was planned, discussed, strategized, drafted, and rewritten multiple times. Their team had been preparing for this Australia trip for months. Long before the rumors hit the press, long before the royal insiders reacted, long before Australia itself even knew what was coming. This was going to be their reset, their comeback, their global reintroduction. That was the goal. And to pull it off, they needed something they didn't currently have. Big support, big funding, and big logistics. Which is exactly why the request ended up in Oprah's inbox at 2:14 a.m. So what was in that message? According to sources, it wasn't framed as a demand. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't entitled on the surface. It was elegant, carefully worded, professionally structured. But beneath the polished language and PR-friendly phrasing, the message carried 3 unmistakable asks. A private jet, a high-level security team, fully covered, and potential funding or support for a media project tied to the trip. Let's take those one at a time, because each part has its own weight. And together, they make up the infamous request that insiders say pushed Oprah to her breaking point. Ask number 1, the private jet. Now, let's be honest. Harry and Meghan requesting a private jet isn't shocking on its own. Lots of celebrities, billionaires, and royals use private jets. It comes with the territory. But the issue wasn't the jet itself. It was who they wanted to provide it. Oprah. Oprah Winfrey. Media empire builder. Self-made billionaire. Powerhouse of influence. But not, under any circumstances, a personal transportation sponsor. Sources say the message framed the jet as a logistical necessity to ensure safety, privacy, and control of media narratives. In other words, they didn't want Australian or British tabloids analyzing flight logs, tracking commercial airports, or leaking details about their movements. Fair enough. Privacy matters. But asking Oprah? That was another matter entirely. Because Oprah doesn't lend her jet lightly. In fact, she almost never does. It's more than a vehicle. It's a symbol. A boundary. A space she only shares with people she trusts completely. And Harry and Meghan? Their relationship with Oprah had not been in completely trusted territory for a long time. Ask number 2, the security team. This is where things get complicated. Harry has been fighting legal battles in the UK about security. Meghan has raised concerns about paparazzi. They genuinely believe their safety is at risk, and in fairness, the world can be dangerous for public figures. But this request wasn't for normal security. It wasn't for a couple of protection officers. It wasn't even for a short-term, targeted team. It was reportedly for full, multi-location, internationally coordinated, round-the-clock protection for the entire duration of the Australia trip. Paid for by Oprah. Let that sink in. A multi-million-dollar operation. Weeks of logistics. A security force comparable to what high-level political figures require. And Oprah footing the bill. This wasn't a favor. This was an investment. And Oprah didn't ask to be part of this project. Ask number 3, the media project support. Now this is the part that made Hollywood insiders raise an eyebrow. According to the rumor mill, Harry and Meghan weren't just planning a visit to Australia. They were planning to film parts of it. Maybe a documentary. Maybe a series. Maybe a global special highlighting causes they care about. The details were vague and fluid, as early projects often are. But one detail wasn't vague. They floated the idea of Oprah partnering or aligning with the project, perhaps through promotion, production networks, or brand association. Think about what that means. Harry and Meghan wanted Oprah to put her name, her influence, and possibly her production company behind their Australia trip. A trip that was already politically sensitive. A trip that could be seen as competing with or undermining the monarchy. A trip that risked triggering Commonwealth backlash. A trip that would reignite every royal drama of the last 5 years. And they wanted Oprah involved. Not because it made strategic sense for her, but because it made strategic sense for them. Now ask yourself, if you were Oprah, would you attach your brand to yet another global event that could turn into a storm? Would you risk your reputation again? Would you knowingly walk into controversy when you're trying to step away from drama? It's not hard to understand her answer. But here's the part that makes this story even more dramatic. Oprah didn't say no. She didn't decline. She didn't push back. She didn't negotiate. She simply didn't reply. She chose the quietest response possible, which also happened to be the loudest. And according to multiple people familiar with the situation, that silence sent Harry and Meghan spiraling internally. Because in their world, silence is worse than criticism. Criticism can be addressed. Criticism can be negotiated. Criticism can be managed. But silence means someone doesn't want to be involved at all. When Oprah didn't reply, the Sussex team reportedly followed up a few days later, politely, professionally, cautiously. That message also went unanswered. Then another follow-up. Then another gentle check-in. Still nothing. That's when they began to understand. Oprah wasn't busy. She wasn't traveling. She wasn't unavailable. She was avoiding them. A source close to a well-connected Montecito circle put it bluntly. When Oprah Winfrey doesn't respond, she's not being rude. She's speaking. But why was this particular request such a turning point? Because for Oprah, this wasn't just about logistics. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about the PR risk. It was about the expectation, the assumption that she would do it, the underlying belief that she owed them continued support, the sense that they saw her not as a friend, but as a resource. And Oprah? She doesn't do one-sided relationships. Not personally. Not professionally. Not ever. Here's a detail that stunned people in her circle. The message from the Sussexes never fully acknowledged the strain the 2021 interview placed on Oprah's reputation. It never addressed the fallout. It never recognized that Oprah absorbed the brunt of global backlash while Harry and Meghan moved on to Netflix, Spotify, book deals, and speaking tours. It was almost as if they forgot Oprah took the biggest risk of all and paid the biggest price. And now, 2 years later, they were asking her to take another. If you were Oprah, how would you feel? Used? Unappreciated? Taken for granted? Cornered? Or simply exhausted? Because that's what one insider said. Oprah is just tired of being pulled into their storms. And storms were coming. Because the Sussexes Australia plan wasn't a small project. It wasn't a casual trip. It wasn't a quick visit. It was going to be huge. A global media moment. A political flashpoint. A royal provocation. And a Hollywood gamble. Exactly the kind of situation Oprah has spent the last decade trying to avoid. So the message sat there. Unread? No. Ignored? Yes. Replied to? Absolutely not. And Oprah's silence didn't just end a conversation. It triggered a domino effect that the Sussexes never anticipated. Oprah's distance quietly alerted other Hollywood figures. Her silence signaled hesitation. Her lack of reply became the unofficial warning. One executive said, "When Oprah steps back, everyone else steps back too." And that's exactly what happened. The Sussexes reached out to other big names. Some responded politely. Some stalled. Some declined. All of them had heard the same whispers. Oprah's out. And if Oprah's out, who's in? But here's where the real tension explodes. Prince William got wind of the request. He learned that the Sussexes were trying to fund their Australia trip through Oprah, and according to insiders, he was furious. Because this wasn't just a PR concern anymore. This was a geopolitical concern. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part people always get wrong. When a celebrity falls out of favor, they imagine a dramatic explosion, a public betrayal, a televised scandal, a slap, a scream, a viral clip. But in Hollywood, the real collapses don't happen loudly. They happen quietly. They happen behind doors that never fully close. They happen through subtle shifts in tone, in scheduling, in energy. And that is exactly how Hollywood began pulling away from Harry and Meghan. One publicist described it like this. It wasn't a break. It was a fade. A slow, controlled fade. One that became impossible to ignore once Oprah set the tone. Here's something most people don't understand. Hollywood is not built on fame. It is built on patterns, trends, signals. And the biggest signal you can ever receive is silence from someone powerful. When Oprah distanced herself, people noticed. Executives noticed. Producers noticed. Agents noticed. Streaming giants noticed. And almost overnight, the temperature around the Sussexes shifted. No one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. But everyone began behaving as if they already had. The first real sign came from a major Hollywood event. A private gathering of A-listers, philanthropists, studio heads, and directors. The kind of event where the conversations decide who gets funded, who gets promoted, who gets introduced, and who gets quietly erased. According to one guest, Harry and Meghan's names came up briefly during a discussion about upcoming projects. "Oh, them," someone said. "I don't think Oprah's working with them anymore." Just 6 words. Casual. Thrown out like a passing observation. But those 6 words changed the room. "What happened?" another guest asked. "Why did she pull back? What's the story? Is it true?" Suddenly, the Sussexes were not a hot topic. They were a liability. Because Oprah's silence didn't just signal that she was stepping away. It signaled something bigger. Proceed with caution. You see, in Hollywood, no one will tell you not to work with someone. They don't need to. All they have to do is stop mentioning their name. And Harry and Meghan's names began disappearing from conversations at lightning speed. And then came the invitations, or rather, the lack of them. In 2020, 2021, even 2022, the Sussexes were everywhere. Award shows, exclusive benefits, Hollywood galas, private dinners, luxury charity evenings filled with billionaires and power brokers. They were seated at the best tables, introduced to the best people, and treated as the newest additions to Hollywood's royal class. But by late 2024, those invitations began to thin out. It wasn't a complete cutoff. Don't picture that. It was more like a noticeable "we'll let you know," followed by no follow-up. A producer who once invited Meghan to a Women in Media summit quietly replaced her with a different high-profile guest. A charity organization that had previously asked Harry to speak shifted to a younger, more aspirational name. A studio that once explored documentary ideas with them suddenly became non-committal. And the reason behind all of this was beautifully simple. Hollywood hates uncertainty. It hates unpredictability. It hates conflict. It hates risk. And Harry and Meghan had become, at least in the eyes of those who make major entertainment decisions, unpredictable. Not because they weren't charismatic, not because they weren't famous, but because their brand carried something dangerous. Uncontrolled drama. Every time they spoke publicly, it became a debate. Every interview created headlines. Every statement became a geopolitical issue. Every move triggered a reaction from Buckingham Palace, the press, or both. And Hollywood doesn't like being caught in the crossfire of someone else's war. One entertainment lawyer, someone who has negotiated deals for some of the biggest names on earth, said it plainly. No one wants to be dragged into the monarchy versus Sussex feud. It's too big, too messy, too international. But Hollywood's distancing wasn't just about the royal drama. There was another, deeper reason. One that struck at the heart of how Hollywood operates: trust. Because here's the truth people rarely say openly. The Oprah interview changed everything, not just in terms of public perception, but in terms of industry perception. Many in Hollywood felt blindsided by the scale of that interview. How much was revealed? How much it affected global politics? How much it angered the royal family? How much controversy Oprah absorbed as a result? And how the fallout continued for years. Executives started wondering, if we partner with Harry and Meghan, will they reveal everything later? Will they turn on us if something goes wrong? Will they sit down with another Oprah-style interview and expose conversations we thought were private? It wasn't paranoia, it was caution, a very Hollywood kind of caution, because the Sussexes had demonstrated something rare. They could turn private grievances into global news in a heartbeat, and the industry never forgot. But what really shocked insiders, what truly cemented the shift, was something subtle Meghan did that seemed small but spoke volumes in Hollywood language. It was the way she began pushing her own projects so aggressively that executives started feeling like they weren't collaborating with her. They were being recruited into a personal PR strategy. One studio head described it this way. Every conversation felt like it was building toward her image, her narrative, her brand. It wasn't creative, it was calculated. Another executive said something even more telling. When Oprah steps away from someone, there's always a reason. And if we don't know the reason, that's even worse. But Hollywood didn't fully turn its back because of Oprah. Oprah was just the match. The dry brush had been piling up for years. Let's break it down. Reason number one, the Spotify drama. Spotify executives publicly complained about the Sussexes. Millions invested. Minimal output. And then the grifters comment from the head of podcast innovation. Hollywood doesn't forget comments like that, especially when they're public. Reason number two, the Netflix frustration. Netflix had one successful series with them, and then a series of lukewarm results. Delayed production, projects restructured, ideas pitched, but never greenlit. Hollywood wants consistency, not scattered output. Reason number three, the family drama never ends. Every project, every interview, every announcement circles back to royal conflict. Hollywood executives privately said they worried that the monarchy storyline had overshadowed everything else. Reason number four, the reputation of being difficult. Whether fair or not, insiders began describing the Sussexes as high maintenance and logistically complicated. And that's when the distancing began. But the most fascinating part of this shift isn't the distance itself. It's how politely Hollywood does it. When Hollywood turns its back, it smiles while doing it. It sends warm but vague messages. It delays meetings with friendly excuses. It says things like, "We're revisiting our strategy," or "We'll circle back when we know more." All of which translate to one thing. No. But here's the kicker. Hollywood doesn't just pull away out of fear or self-preservation. It also pulls away because it follows the scent of power. Oprah stepping back wasn't just a decision. It was a signal. A signal Hollywood respects. A signal Hollywood interprets literally. A signal Hollywood often imitates. And just when the Sussexes began to feel this shift, just when the invitations slowed, the responses thinned, and the offers dried up, that's when a new wave of tension emerged. Because while Hollywood was backing away, Prince William was stepping forward. But not in a friendly way. not in a neutral way, not in a diplomatic way. According to palace insiders, when William heard that Hollywood was distancing itself and that Oprah had quietly severed ties, he didn't see it as a coincidence. He saw it as an opportunity. Because the Australia trip wasn't just a personal project. It wasn't just a PR stunt. It wasn't just a media venture. It was a threat to the monarchy's influence, a threat to Commonwealth relationships, a threat to the careful political groundwork being done behind the scenes. And William, the future king, was not about to let that happen. But what he did next, how he responded, and what he said privately, would push this entire situation into territory no one expected. Hollywood was out. Oprah was out. Australia was reacting. And now, William was preparing to intervene. They say the walls inside Kensington Palace are thick enough to keep secrets for centuries. They've absorbed arguments, celebrations, whispered alliances, and the kinds of royal crises the public never hears about. But on the night Prince William was briefed about Harry and Meghan's rumored 2026 Australia trip and the Oprah funding attempt behind it, even those ancient walls reportedly felt the tension. Because William didn't just react. He erupted. And the person who witnessed it, a senior aide with nearly 2 decades of palace experience, reportedly described it like this. I've seen him angry. I've seen him frustrated. But this was different. This was the kind of fury that comes from years of being pushed, provoked, and blindsided. So what happened? What set William off? And why did the Australia trip, of all things, ignite such a visceral reaction? Let's break it down. According to insiders, William was in the middle of a briefing about upcoming Commonwealth engagements when the Australia rumor surfaced. It wasn't meant to be the focus of the meeting. It wasn't even on the official agenda. It came up as a side comment, almost accidentally, from an advisor who assumed William already knew. But he didn't. And that's the moment everything shifted. The advisor said, casually, there are unconfirmed reports that the Sussexes are planning an unofficial tour of Australia in 2026. Silence. A pause. A tightening of the jaw. Then, planning what? William snapped. The advisor repeated it, more carefully this time. And William's entire demeanor changed. He leaned forward. His tone sharpened. And he asked the single question that made everyone in the room suddenly nervous. Who is funding it? Because William knows the power of money. He knows the power of influence. And he knows the danger of an unofficial royal tour funded by private individuals, especially individuals with enormous media power. When the advisor mentioned the Oprah rumor, the private jet, the security, the possible production support, that's when William reportedly slammed his palm on the table. A rare, emotional gesture. A human gesture. The gesture of someone who has reached a very real breaking point. According to a source familiar with that meeting, William said something along the lines of, "This cannot happen. Not like this. Not again." And suddenly, the room understood. This wasn't about Oprah. This wasn't even about Harry or Meghan personally. This was about something far bigger, something William had been carrying for years. Let me ask you something. Have you ever watched someone you love, someone you trusted, repeatedly step into chaos? And each time, you tell yourself you can handle it, that you can forgive it, that you can rise above it. Until one day you realize the next step they take might destroy something that matters to you more than anything? That's what this moment was for Prince William. Because Australia wasn't just a destination on a map, it was a symbolic battlefield. A place where the royal family's relationship with the Commonwealth is already fragile. A place where the Republican movement is gaining momentum. A place where the monarchy's future hinges on careful diplomacy. And here were Harry and Meghan, reportedly preparing to sweep into Australia like returning celebrities, broadcasting their presence, potentially filming content, and rewriting narratives the palace has spent years managing. Imagine being William. Imagine watching the global reputation of the monarchy, the institution your grandmother spent 70 years protecting, be thrown into unpredictable territory again. Of course he reacted. But the deeper reason for his fury? That goes beyond politics, beyond protocol, beyond royal duties. It goes back to something far more personal. The Oprah interview. To understand why William reacted so intensely, you have to remember how he felt in 2021. Royal insiders say William experienced that interview not as a media event, but as a personal betrayal. A wound he never fully expressed, but deeply internalized. Because Harry wasn't just his brother, he was his partner, his confidant, his teammate in the future of the monarchy. They were raised together, trained together, shaped together for a lifetime of shared responsibility. And when Harry sat down with Oprah, blindsiding the family, detonating bombshells on global TV, William felt something break. Trust, loyalty, connection. And even though years have passed, that fracture never healed. So when William heard the words Oprah and Harry and Meghan in the same sentence again, connected to funding, influence, and another international spotlight, it triggered everything he had buried. He reportedly said, "They are not doing this again. Not with Australia, not with the Commonwealth." Strong words, loaded words, words that show exactly how high the stakes have become. But here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. William wasn't just angry. He was afraid. Not afraid of Harry, not afraid of Meghan, not afraid of Oprah. He was afraid of perception. Because perception shapes nations. Perception shapes politics. Perception shapes legitimacy. And if Harry and Meghan return to Australia in 2026, embraced by the public, funded by American power, shining with media attention, what does that say about the future of the monarchy and the Commonwealth? Especially in a country as politically dynamic as Australia? William knows the numbers. He knows the polls. He knows the debates. Australia is not guaranteed to remain tied to the monarchy forever. In fact, the conversation about becoming a republic grows louder every year. And William understands something the public rarely considers. A wildly successful Sussex tour could accelerate that conversation. He worried, deeply, that Harry and Meghan's presence could be spun as the younger, fresher, more relatable, more modern representation of the royal family. Imagine that. Imagine the monarchy's carefully crafted future being undercut by the very couple who stepped away from royal duties. It wasn't paranoia. It was possibility, and William knew it. But his reaction wasn't just strategic. It was intensely emotional. One aide said, "It was as though all the anger he never expressed, all the grief from losing his brother to this rift, all the frustration of trying to keep the monarchy stable, it all came out at once." William reportedly paced the room, raised his voice, lowered it again, ran his hands through his hair, something he only does when he's overwhelmed. He questioned why no one had warned him sooner. He questioned how serious the Oprah funding rumors were. He questioned what the Sussexes were trying to achieve. But the question that hit the hardest, the one he asked more quietly, more personally, was this: why can't they leave us alone? It wasn't a political question. It wasn't a structural question. It wasn't a question for advisors. It was the question of a brother, a wounded brother, a man who lost someone he once expected to stand beside him for the rest of his life. That's the part people forget. Behind the titles, behind the protocols, behind the palaces, this is a family. A complicated one, a fractured one, a deeply wounded one. And William's reaction wasn't just rage. It was heartbreak. But heartbreak doesn't stop a future king from acting. Once the emotional surge passed, William became something else entirely. Strategic, focused, cold. He reportedly ordered a full assessment of the Sussexes' rumored plans, every detail available. Funding sources, potential partners, production angles, political implications. He wanted every risk on the table. Because this wasn't going to be another Oprah interview moment, where the monarchy was caught off guard, blindsided, and left scrambling. No, William vowed privately. Not this time. He was going to get ahead of it. He was going to shut it down if necessary. He was going to protect the monarchy, even if it meant stepping into a public spotlight he never wanted. But here's the most shocking part. Even as he planned his strategic response, William couldn't stop thinking about Oprah. Why Oprah? Why again? Why was she still involved in any capacity? It bothered him. It unsettled him. It triggered memories he'd rather forget. Because Oprah, in William's mind, represented the moment everything changed. The moment the family's private pain became international entertainment. And now, she was linked to another global moment? No wonder William reacted the way he did. But the story doesn't end with a meeting, a slammed desk, or a burst of emotions. William took action, immediate action. He reportedly contacted multiple advisors across 3 continents. He issued new communication directives. He prepared contingency plans. and he began shaping a response that would influence not only Australia, but the entire Commonwealth. Australia, a country of sweeping coasts, ancient landscapes, and bustling cities. A nation proud of its independence, its history, and its growing voice in global politics. But in 2026, according to Palace insiders, Australia is about to become the epicenter of an international drama that no one expected, and that the royal family is already dreading. For most people, a royal visit to Australia sounds like an elegant affair: red carpets, charity events, elegant dinners, and speeches under the summer sun. But for the Sussexes, insiders say, this wasn't going to be a standard tour. This was a carefully calculated attempt to reboot their public image, to prove to the world that they remain relevant, adored, and influential. And that's where the problem begins. Prince William, the future king, reportedly views Australia as more than a vacation spot. He sees it as a delicate geopolitical balance. Australia isn't just a country, it's a cornerstone of the Commonwealth. A nation increasingly scrutinizing its ties to the monarchy. And William is well aware that any move by Harry and Meghan could influence public perception on a national scale. Royal insiders describe William's reaction as a mixture of anger and disbelief. He reportedly said, in a private briefing, "They can't just stroll in like Hollywood royalty. They're not just touring. They're staging a spectacle. And they're not asking permission." It's a fair point. Every royal tour is meticulously planned, reviewed, and approved, months, sometimes years, in advance. Every move is calculated to avoid controversy, preserve relationships, and maintain the monarchy's image. And yet, the Sussexes seemed poised to ignore every precedent. According to sources, the plan was audacious: multiple cities, public appearances, private galas, media coverage, and yes, filming components that could be monetized. The goal? To create a narrative of relevance, philanthropy, and cultural influence. And they wanted it done without touching their own pockets, instead relying on external support. Which brings us back to Oprah. The Australian trip wasn't just about public perception. It was a logistical and financial gamble of unprecedented scale. Private jets, multi-city security, event management, and media production all come with costs that, according to sources, could easily exceed several $million. And the alleged request for Oprah to fund or assist with these costs is what reportedly raised William's ire. From a palace perspective, the implications were staggering. A privately funded Sussex tour could undermine royal protocol, challenge diplomatic relationships, and create the perception that the monarchy is divided. Australia, unlike the UK, has a growing Republican movement. It's a nation debating its constitutional future, a nation where the monarchy's image matters. Perhaps more than people realize. And the Sussexes? According to insiders, they seemed oblivious. It's one thing to be welcomed as a tourist, another entirely to be received as a spectacle, a media-driven event overshadowing official engagements. And that is exactly how Palace insiders interpreted the 2026 Australia plan. But what makes this story particularly fascinating is the intersection of celebrity, politics, and national identity. Because in Australia, unlike in the UK, public sentiment can shift quickly. A royal visit that is perceived as self-serving, grandiose, or out of touch could ignite debates in Parliament, media, and public forums. The Sussexes, intentionally or not, were potentially stepping into a volatile political arena. Hollywood's involvement, or lack thereof, added another layer of complexity. Oprah's silence, followed by the gradual distancing of other high-profile figures, sent a subtle message. The world's most influential networks were reluctant to endorse this ambitious plan. And without celebrity backing, the trip risked losing credibility and financial support, making the entire venture a precarious gamble. Meanwhile, Australian political insiders were reportedly keeping a close eye on every leak, every rumor, and every proposed itinerary. Their concern was simple: how would the Commonwealth balance tradition with celebrity spectacle? How could public perception be managed without inflaming local debates over the monarchy's role? And, crucially, what would be the impact on Australia's diplomatic relationship with the UK? All of this pressure converged on one central figure, Prince William. According to insiders, he saw the potential fallout not merely as a personal grievance, but as a strategic threat to the monarchy's stability. A privately funded, highly publicized Sussex tour could embolden Republican sentiment. It could skew public opinion. It could portray the monarchy as fragmented, a house divided between official representatives and exiled members pursuing personal agendas. William reportedly acted swiftly. Private briefings, emergency consultations, and confidential communications were initiated to assess every possible outcome. Advisors began evaluating the trip's potential impact on international relations, public perception, and the monarchy's long-term objectives. Every detail of the proposed Australia visit, from flight paths to public appearances, was scrutinized. Meanwhile, the Sussexes were reportedly oblivious to the full weight of this scrutiny. According to insiders, their focus remained on personal branding, media strategy, and the logistical advantages of Oprah's involvement. The gap between their intentions and the monarchy's concerns widened with each passing day, creating a tension that insiders describe as palpable, felt not only in London but across Montecito, Hollywood, and Canberra. The timing of the trip also contributed to William's unease. Planned for 2026, it coincided with several key events. Parliamentary discussions on constitutional reform, high-profile national celebrations, and media campaigns highlighting Australia's future in the Commonwealth. From a strategic standpoint, any uncoordinated royal engagement by Harry and Meghan could disrupt long-term planning, overshadow official initiatives, and inadvertently politicize the monarchy in a country still deeply divided on its role. Sources say William's private frustration was compounded by personal considerations. The emotional wounds from 2021, the Oprah interview, the public criticism, the family rifts, were still raw. Watching Harry and Meghan orchestrate a potentially high-profile tour without consultation triggered a visceral reaction. It wasn't just about protocol, it was about trust, responsibility, and the perception of accountability. And according to insiders, the palace anticipated that public awareness of the trip could lead to intense media scrutiny. Headlines speculating on funding, security, celebrity involvement, and royal approval were inevitable. Any misstep could be amplified across international networks, magnifying the stakes far beyond a simple visit. Here's the kicker. While the Sussexes were planning logistics, media campaigns, and social appearances, they reportedly underestimated one critical factor: Prince William's willingness to intervene. Not publicly, not yet, but decisively behind the scenes. The palace had already begun evaluating contingency plans, assessing political implications, and preparing to counter any narrative that might challenge the monarchy's authority or reputation. So while Hollywood was distancing itself and Oprah remained silent, the monarchy was quietly mobilizing. Every official, every advisor, every strategist was analyzing potential outcomes, contingency plans, and messaging strategies. Australia was no longer just a destination. It had become a battlefield of influence, perception, and power. And in the middle of all this, Harry and Meghan reportedly remained focused on the allure of the trip: the beaches, the media attention, the perception of validation, the idea of returning triumphantly to the Commonwealth. According to insiders, they underestimated the political, strategic, and personal complexities and overestimated the willingness of powerful allies to participate. Which brings us to the tipping point. As palace officials examined every facet of the proposed Australia tour, they reportedly concluded that intervention would be necessary, not only to maintain royal protocol, but to preserve relationships, protect the monarchy's image, and preempt potential fallout in both the UK and Australia. And that intervention, when it came, would be decisive. According to sources, it would involve a combination of private diplomacy, strategic messaging, and, ultimately, a subtle but unmistakable signal to Harry and Meghan. The Australia plan could not proceed without serious consequences. But here's the suspenseful question. How would the Sussexes react when they realized their carefully orchestrated plan had triggered the full force of the monarchy's strategic oversight? Would they adapt, push back, or double down on their ambitions despite the risks? Because in this story, every move is calculated, every decision has consequences, and every silence carries weight. And as we move forward, the tension surrounding Australia is only going to escalate, drawing in celebrities, royalty, media, and the public in a way that no one anticipated. The stage is set. The players are in position. And the next move will ignite a chain reaction that affects not just a royal visit, but the fragile balance of power, perception, and influence across continents. Meghan Markle never does anything halfway. That's what people close to her say. And it's a mantra that has guided her career, her public image, and, now, her attempts to navigate the murky waters of 2026. Because insiders report that while Prince William was quietly mobilizing, while Oprah and Hollywood began pulling back, Meghan had a plan, a meticulously crafted, audacious PR strategy designed to put her and Harry back on the global stage. And Australia was at the center of it. From the outside, it might look simple, a trip, a few public appearances, and media coverage. But the reality, according to insiders, was far more complex. Meghan's approach wasn't just about travel. It was about narrative control, perception management, and brand rehabilitation. It was about reasserting relevance in a world that had started to question her influence, and, by extension, Harry's. According to sources, Meghan's strategy had three main components: visibility, messaging, and partnerships. And she believed she had identified the perfect vehicle to execute it. First, visibility. She reportedly wanted every step of the Australia tour to be carefully curated for maximum exposure. Think public events that highlight humanitarian work, photo ops with charitable organizations, interviews with influential media outlets, and social media engagement that positions the couple as accessible yet aspirational. This wasn't about casual sightseeing. This was about creating a narrative that couldn't be ignored. Every handshake, every speech, every charitable visit was to be documented, disseminated, and amplified. Second, messaging. Meghan allegedly spent hours with her communications team refining the story she wanted to tell. According to insiders, the goal was clear: we are modern, compassionate, and socially conscious. We are here to contribute, not just to be seen. Every sentence, every soundbite, every Instagram post was supposedly vetted for impact. But here's the kicker. The messaging also had to subtly counter the narrative that Hollywood was withdrawing support. It was a careful dance between asserting agency and avoiding alienation. Third, partnerships. And this is where Oprah comes back into the picture. According to sources, Meghan hoped to leverage Oprah's credibility, network, and influence to amplify the Australia trip. Not as a financial crutch alone, but as an implicit endorsement. If Oprah is involved, the narrative shifts from privately funded celebrity escapade to charitable, impactful, media-savvy royal engagement. But as we know, Oprah's silence had already complicated that angle. Without her, Meghan's carefully crafted plan faced a critical vulnerability: perception risk. Without a powerful ally to validate the narrative, the strategy could be seen as self-serving rather than philanthropic. The complexity didn't end there. Internally, Meghan reportedly faced tension with her team. Some advisors cautioned against relying on Oprah or other Hollywood figures, warning that the silence was a sign that support was waning. Others urged her to accelerate the narrative, suggesting that timing was critical. The longer she waited, the more opportunity for public skepticism or royal counteraction. Meghan, according to insiders, pushed forward anyway, believing that her preparation, presentation, and attention to detail would be enough to carry the plan. Meanwhile, the palace was observing. William and his advisors, having learned about the proposed Australia itinerary, were reportedly preparing contingency strategies. Sources indicate that the monarchy viewed Meghan's planned visibility and messaging as a double-edged sword, effective for controlling perception if done correctly, but potentially destabilizing if it deviated from approved protocols or clashed with royal expectations. This meant that Meghan's carefully constructed plan was already under scrutiny from multiple fronts: the public, media, Hollywood, and the palace itself. And this tension added to Meghan's urgency. According to insiders, she began exploring additional avenues to reinforce her position: meetings with potential Australian partners, outreach to international media, and early discussions with charities reportedly intensified. Every email, every call, every proposal was reportedly designed to ensure that the Australia trip would not only occur, but occur on her terms. But here's the part that most people don't see. Meghan's plan relied heavily on timing, optics, and control, three variables that are notoriously unpredictable. Hollywood's retreat meant that one pillar of the strategy was shaky. Prince William's growing concern meant that another pillar faced potential intervention. And the unpredictability of media coverage meant that the narrative could be reframed at any moment, potentially undermining months of careful planning. This is why insiders describe Meghan's behavior during this period as intense, even frenetic. She reportedly held multiple strategy sessions each day, reviewing itineraries, rehearsing speeches, and vetting potential photo opportunities. According to one source, she was laser-focused on projecting calm, authority, and relevance, even as everything around her shifted. There's also a psychological element. Sources suggest that Meghan's need to control the narrative is partially fueled by past experiences, the intense scrutiny, the family drama, and the global criticism she's faced over the last decade. This isn't just a PR plan. It's a personal mission to assert control over a life that has often felt dictated by external forces. And Australia, in her mind, represents the perfect stage for this assertion. But for every careful decision, every calculated move, there was risk. Observers note that the public perception of a celebrity royal could backfire. Australia is not the United States. It's not Hollywood. Public opinion is nuanced. Any appearance of self-interest, entitlement, or reliance on American celebrity power, particularly Oprah, could trigger criticism. And this is compounded by the growing Republican conversation in the country. According to insiders, even minor missteps could be interpreted as disrespect to national sentiment or as an attempt to manipulate public opinion. At the same time, William and palace advisors were reportedly monitoring Meghan's planning closely. Private briefings, intelligence reports on potential media coverage, and consultations with Australian officials were all reportedly underway. The palace understood that if the Sussexes proceeded without approval or coordination, it could create a public perception problem, one that might not be recoverable. In short, Meghan's strategy was brilliant, ambitious, and bold, but also high-stakes, precarious, and subject to forces beyond her control. And it is in this delicate balancing act that the drama intensifies. Every action has consequences. Every misstep risks amplified scrutiny. And every decision could either reinforce her narrative or unravel it entirely. And yet, according to insiders, Meghan was undeterred. She believed that with careful execution, precise messaging, and strategic partnerships, the Australia trip could serve as a redemption arc, a masterstroke to reclaim relevance, influence, and public goodwill. But here's the cliffhanger. Even the most carefully crafted plan is vulnerable to variables outside anyone's control. Oprah's silence, Hollywood's retreat, William's growing concern, and Australia's political sensitivities all converge to create an environment where a single misstep could derail the entire strategy. When the first message arrived, it was a polite request, the kind of message you might expect from a friend seeking help. But according to insiders, what arrived in Oprah's inbox wasn't just a note. It was a strategic ask, carefully phrased, full of implied obligations and expectations. And that's when her advisor stepped in. Oprah, powerful as she is, doesn't make big decisions in isolation. Every major commitment, every high-profile engagement, every potential financial exposure goes through a network of trusted advisors, lawyers, and confidants. And this request from the Sussexes reportedly triggered a cascade of private consultations, strategy sessions, and quiet warnings. The first reaction, according to sources, was disbelief. One senior advisor reportedly said, "We've dealt with ambitious clients before, but this is on another level. They're asking for resources, exposure, and influence in a way that's almost transactional." They weighed the request carefully. A private jet, high-level security, media alignment, celebrity validation, all at Oprah's expense. The advisors ran through every possible outcome: public perception, media fallout, legal ramifications, and the risks to Oprah's brand. They looked at the logistics, they looked at the optics, and they looked at precedent. Because in Hollywood, perception is everything. And according to insiders, the advisors agreed. This was a potential reputation risk, carefully disguised as a friendly ask. One advisor reportedly said, "Oprah has a legacy. She built it over decades. We're not just protecting her finances. We're protecting the trust she's cultivated worldwide." And protecting trust meant drawing a line, setting boundaries, making clear that this request could not be accommodated, no matter how politely phrased. Sources say that the advisors did not act impulsively. They didn't want to insult the Sussexes. They didn't want a confrontation. They wanted clarity, safety, and control. And that's when they crafted the response strategy, or, more accurately, the non-response strategy. Silence. It was deliberate. One insider explained, sometimes the loudest message you can send is no message at all. Silence carries weight. It communicates a boundary without creating unnecessary drama. And that's exactly what happened. Oprah's team stopped responding. They held the messages, read them carefully, discussed them, and then did nothing. No reply. No engagement. Not even a polite decline. Just nothing. It was maddening, according to insiders. The Sussexes reportedly followed up multiple times, each time receiving the same response, silence. And in Hollywood, where every opportunity is a currency, silence is a powerful message. It tells you that access, influence, and collaboration are no longer available. Some insiders say that Oprah's advisors even went further. They reportedly reviewed the Sussexes' past projects, media engagements, and public behavior to determine whether this pattern of asking, demanding, and expecting was sustainable. They considered the potential for future requests, the likelihood of repeated exposure, and the risk of further entangling Oprah in a cycle of controversy. The consensus was clear: enough was enough. One senior advisor allegedly said, "We have to protect her from being drawn into something that isn't hers." It's not personal. It's about brand integrity and legacy. And that's when the decision crystallized. Oprah would not respond. Not politely. Not with negotiation. Not with a counteroffer. Just silence. But there's an important nuance here. According to sources, the advisors didn't just tell Oprah to remain silent. They also prepared her for potential fallout. They ran through scenarios. Media speculation, public interpretation, potential backlash from fans of the Sussexes, and the possibility that the story could reach the royal family. They prepared talking points, contingency messages, and even legal guidance. Because in Hollywood, a single silence can ignite speculation. And in this case, speculation would be massive. When the advisors completed their assessment, Oprah reportedly felt confident. She trusted their judgment. She trusted their experience. And she trusted herself. The silence was intentional, protective, and strategic. But for Harry and Meghan, the silence was anything but benign. Insiders describe growing frustration and confusion on the Sussex side. According to sources, Meghan reportedly tried multiple approaches, sending polite reminders, clarifying the scope of the request, and emphasizing the altruistic aspects of the trip. Each attempt reportedly failed to elicit a response, and that's when panic reportedly set in. One insider described the Sussexes' reaction. They were used to influence, to attention, to the kind of validation that powerful figures provide. When it didn't come, it was destabilizing. They didn't know how to react, and that made the situation worse. The advisors, meanwhile, anticipated this. They knew that Harry and Meghan might push harder, increase pressure, and attempt public persuasion. That's why they maintained strict control over communications, monitored all incoming messages, and advised Oprah to continue the silence. It's a classic strategy in celebrity management. Respond when necessary, withhold when appropriate, and always protect the client's interests. But in this case, the stakes were unusually high. This wasn't just a celebrity request. It was a potential intersection of Hollywood, global media, and royal politics. According to insiders, Oprah's advisors also considered the secondary effects. How would Hollywood respond if Oprah complied? How would the royal family interpret her involvement? How would public opinion shift if it appeared that Oprah was endorsing a privately funded tour of Australia? The answers were clear. The risks outweighed the benefits. And so, the decision held. Oprah's silence became the loudest message of all. But here's where the story gets even more dramatic. The silence didn't just affect the Sussexes. It set off a chain reaction across Hollywood and royal circles. The withdrawal of support, the visible boundary, and the lack of engagement signaled a shift in power dynamics. Other celebrities reportedly began reconsidering their own associations. Media outlets hesitated to promote the trip. Advisors in Australia started questioning the legitimacy and feasibility of the plan. Everywhere the news traveled, the pattern was the same. Oprah's distance sent ripples, and those ripples were about to collide with one very powerful figure who had been silently observing the situation, Prince William. Because while Oprah's advisors were keeping her insulated, William was strategizing. And according to insiders, he saw an opportunity in this withdrawal, an opportunity to reinforce